well, I don't know if you can see it on camera. I see the local big time operators up there putting burn down on. 'Tis the season. Tomorrow it's supposed to, actually tonight and tomorrow it's supposed to rain pretty good. Supposed to. We'll see if it actually happens. But anyhow, we're back on the spreader today. The rest of my parts for the applicator should all be here between tomorrow and Friday. So this weekend, I know I've been saying it for like the last 3 weekends, but this weekend, fingers crossed, that should be done and off the plate. Today, hopefully this is going to be done and off the plate, and we can start focusing on some other stuff. Well, done and off the plate for now. This thing's obviously going to need some love a little later in life. But so I got new shafts, new bearings, new pulleys, new spinners and paddles, and a new gearbox. That gearbox ain't too cheap. That was an $800 gearbox, but it's kind of special. Not only does it have this tall upper spindle, but because this gearbox is mounted upside down, whereas most 90-degree gearboxes are going to be mounted with this shaft either pointing down or to the side, and you don't got to worry about this bearing being lubricated because it's at oil level. 8090 can climb gears, but it can't climb the shaft, so there's no way for this to get oil. So the way this gearbox is made, this is actually a double tapered bearing because this shaft doesn't go through like a lot of 90-degree gearboxes. And this is actually a greasable bearing. According to the book, you're actually supposed to give it 2 pumps of grease at least once a day, depending on intensity of usage, which is probably why the other gearbox failed, because you can see the 2 nubbins in the rust where the grease zerk and this breather used to be, but they ain't there no more. So yeah, that other gearbox was a lost cause. It was all ate out up here from the shaft running at a cockeyed angle, so you weren't going to get the bearings in there anymore. It wasn't going to hold a seal. The shaft was all ate. It was just, you could have dumped a bunch of money in that gearbox in parts, and in the end you still had a rusted out shell with a bunch of new parts in it that wasn't going to last. So new gearbox, problem taken care of. And then these guys, as you can see, the back of this one looks like hell. I was livid yesterday. I got all my hardware, all the bolts and everything in this, the bolts, nuts, lock washers, everything stainless. Put my first coat of paint on a few days ago, like you saw, and yesterday finally got all the bolts to put everything together to put a second coat of paint on. So the primer and the paint that was on it was dry for 2 days. Got it all together, started spraying it yesterday, got this one done, was working on that one, walked back around the side of this one. This whole side orange peeled. No clue why. Can't explain it. I made sure when I was working on them my hands were clean. I washed my hands multiple times. I used clean rags to wipe off any handprints that I did leave on it. There was, I can't explain it. Don't know why. It orange peeled, and it took off the new paint and the dry layer of paint under it. Didn't really hurt the primer, but it was all Rust-Oleum paint. It was all Rust-Oleum primer. I can't explain it. So, but this stuff's only temporary because it's all going to get repainted when we redo the whole spreader anyhow. So, and I did figure out what model it is. It's a model 10 PTFT, right? Right, that sounds right. They make 2 models on that same frame. There's a 10 PTFT and a 20 PTFT. The 10 is a 6-ton, the 20 is an 8-ton. And actually, technically, that qualifies as the 8-ton because the 10 PTFT is only the flared part of the box and stops at the top of the box flares, and then the 20 PTFT has extensions on it. Those extensions have been added because obviously on the 20 they are welded into the box and they're stainless steel. They're not the angle iron and the wood. So that's been added on to make it an 8-ton, but I've had 12,000 pounds on that spreader before. You could probably get 8 ton of lime. I don't think you'd ever get 8 ton of fertilizer, but it'll hold 6 ton pretty easy. So for the guy that told me on the last video that it's not a 6-ton spreader, sorry, tell that to Chandler, because they classify that as a 6-ton and it's got the extensions on it to make it an 8-ton. Sorry for your luck. The other thing I'd like to do to that is get rid of the wooden extension boards and actually get some stainless extensions bent up for it and actually put stainless on the top and get rid of the wood altogether, just for longevity, and it looks better than that wood scabbed up there. So anyhow, we can hopefully get all this put together. I got all my bolts, I got all the parts. The only thing I didn't actually get was key stock and set screws, but we should have that here already, so hopefully we can get that together yet today. All right, we're finally going. we did not have key stock like I thought we did. We did, but I saw this little nubbin sticking out, and it still had stickers, so I thought it was a full chunk. It was not a full chunk, so I had to go to the hardware store and get another chunk. And then while I was there, apparently everything happened for a reason. I must have been supposed to show up at the hardware store at that particular time on this particular day, because I got there, and there's 2 guys that work there full-time, and then every once in a while they'll hire high school kids to work part-time. But anyway, they were both out in the parking lot. They had both forklifts framed out like bad, and all they had to try to pull it out was this little, I think it was a Jeep Liberty, and it was not doing the job. So I went in, got my stuff bought, and came back out, and I said, okay, do you need me to hook onto that to see if I can pull it out? So I got both their forklifts pulled out for them while I was there. So apparently everything happened for a reason. But anyhow, a little doink there he's taken care of. Got the key stock, got back, got my first 2 keys cut, and I'm fiddling around, could not get them to fit in the slot, and finally I was like, they didn't do something stupid and make this thing metric, did they? And it turns out they didn't. Everything measures about 251-ish, all the slots do. And apparently National needs to get their die or whatever they draw this through checked out, or they need to have some better quality standards, because all this key stock measures 253, 254, so it was too big for the slots. So you get it cut, and then you got to kiss it on the belt sander to get it to actually fit in the slot. Which apparently, which side? I had it in one side, that side. Do a little. I hate fitting keys. It's the worst thing. If I can get that. Well, that one still needs a little work. The other thing I found out, you kiss them on the belt sander, they got high spots and low spots. They're not even perfectly square, which is kind of something that's important when it comes to having a piece of key stock. But anyhow, we need to be, where's my tape measure? 3 inches from the bottom of the shaft to the bottom of the spinner. Measuring off of the old ones anyhow. Okay, now there's the hammer. You tap it in, then it wants to slide back and forth. This spinners actually fit really nice. I was worried it was going to be a fight. And also I know we had talked about I might have been getting stainless steel spinners for it. Priced them out, that didn't happen. They were $3.99 a piece for the spinners and paddles in stainless. They were $140 a piece, so you could buy two for the price of less than, or two for less than the price of one stainless in regular high carbon steel. And the new ones are actually thicker than the original ones. And I figured if the old ones can survive the lack of maintenance that they get at a fertilizer dealer for God knows how long they've had these things, if I take care of them, these will probably outlast the rest of the spreader. The one thing that I did do to help is, one of the problems with these things is they always sit full of water. There's no drain holes. So I drilled 2 3/8 holes at the bottom of the cone to drain any water that might be sitting in there while it's parked, so that it's not actually sitting there full of water, because, you know, fertilizer and water mix real good together. Okay, and then once that's on and set, they must have decided that they needed to add this lock collar to help support the spinner. The ones I took off didn't have this, but the parts diagram, and I called the guy, or called down there to talk to the parts guy, and apparently you could just put this up there and that just helps support that, and then your bearing, I got to measure how far up the bearing goes. I'm gonna stack the bottom up the way those are, and then we'll leave the top loose, put them on there, and then put the top together. So, and it's a good thing that it's nice enough to work outside, and this project doesn't really require anything power tool wise that isn't battery operated, because I'm sitting here putting this bearing on and the lights flip off, and then they flick back on real fast, and then they flick out, and then I hear a loud bang. I don't know if there was a car accident, they hit a pole or what, but the fuse up at the corner popped, which was the bang, but at least it's nice weather out. Alright, now for the fun part, trying to get this thing up here and balance bolts and all that good stuff. Same thing, stainless flat washers, lock washers, bolts, nuts. Just to make life that much easier. And even though they're stainless, you still anti-seize them, because stainless doesn't even get along with itself very well, and you'll gall threads. So you put a little bit of anti-seize on there to lubricate them, you're less likely to gall them. All right, that's satisfying. Something about some nice quiet bearings and just, oh, that feels good. But now we need to get the gearbox on before we can put the pulleys on, because the gearbox is kind of what sets, the gearbox sets the height for this pulley, and this pulley sets the height for this pulley. So everything, I guess technically this pulley could set the height for the gearbox and that one, but either way I want the gearbox on first. All right, now just to make sure I had enough key stock, I got some 1.5-inch long 1/4x1/4 keys out of the, when I was at the hardware store, just out of the drawers. These fit just fine, no grinding. How come National can't do that with their full-length key stock? Must be hard. Is this one? Oh, that screw's already in there. I have the right wrench. Nope. And you would. They don't leave you a whole lot of room to play with on this thing either. But when you draw the pulley up on that, it'll open up that clearance and you'll be all good. And unfortunately, because it's a taper lock pulley, as much as I'd want to, you can't put anti-seize on the taper. There's kind of explicit instructions to not use any kind of lubricant on the taper. But we can anti-seize everything else. Actually, there's also explicit instructions to take some sort of lacquer thinner, grease, some sort of grease cutting compound, and cut all of the machine oil and rust prohibitive and everything off of that. But I didn't do that because I figured we'll leave something in there. And you're also supposed to torque them to 9 foot-pounds, but we do not have a torque wrench that'll go to 9 foot-pounds. And unfortunately, I do not have an inch-pound wrench that'll go up to 108 inch-pounds. So we're gonna run them up to 80 and probably call it good. All right, and all 3 pulleys are on. Looks nice not being all crusty. I honestly don't know how them old pulleys kept belts on them without eating them up as bad as they were. But now we can put belts on. Where can I set you? I don't know where I can set you. There's not a good spot. Magnets don't stick to stainless. It tries to stick to stainless, but it doesn't work very well. I got the belts the book called for, so hopefully they're right. Come on, fall on. There you go. What is a good spot to pry off of? Oh, the other thing I noticed, this thing originally had a 90-degree grease zerk in it pointing straight up. That obviously don't work. And in order to get it pointing the right way, you had to back it off 3/4 of a turn. But that ain't gonna work because now it's loose. And then it all made sense. There's a cutout right here in the gearbox mount for a grease gun to a straight grease zerk. So I put a straight grease zerk in it, and now we're good to go. All right, belts are tight, bearings are tight, everything's tight. I can tell you one thing: when the time comes to finish redoing the back end of this spreader, one major change that's going to happen is these little pieces of round stock they got on here for bearing stops are going to get cut off and replaced with flat stock and jack bolts, so that you got set screws you can actually jack those bearings around and line everything back here without having to use a pry bar, because there is nothing to pry off of. So it's a little bit of a chore getting everything tight and square and in line with itself. But I think we did pretty decent. So next thing I can do is put this guy back on. Good thing I got some spare 3/8 lock washers, because those are like 7/16, not 3/8. All right, that's in. It works. I need to throw some grease in the zerks, but that goes all the way back and forth like it's supposed to. So, which the one thing I don't see on the rate chart, unless it was on a different sticker, is your inch setting for that. So I'll have to look in the book and see if it gives it somewhere and either write it down on here or yeah, I don't see, because that's the gate setting right there. Material weight, sprocket ratio. So yeah, it gives you your sprocket ratio to use. Your gate setting, it doesn't give you that, which that moves back and forth and determines where the material hits the beaters to determine your spread width based on a given material type. So for lime, you're going to put it in a different spot. For fertilizer, you're going to put it in a different spot. You'd think it'd be on there unless it was like one of these covered up stickers that you can't read no more. But those are done. So real quick, just to get it out of the way, because I'm obviously out of daylight, I'm going to buzz through real quick and get this all put back together, and that'll be it. All right, that turned into a fiasco. It's almost 10 o'clock now. When I left you, it was just a little after 8. Let me get the lights going here so we can see what's going on. So, got the shaft back on, everything good. Came up here to tighten the main drive belt, and I knew there was a set screw here. Did not know there was one back under here. The one back under there was all rusty, crusty, fertilizer rotted. So 45 minutes of cussing and heating and working in WD-40, and I finally got it out without breaking it or having to do any drilling, but it's not exactly what I wanted to be doing at 9:30 at night. But anyway, that's all together. I got oil in the gearbox. I figured before I left you, we would at least roll her over and make sure everything was kosher. Nice and quiet. Strange thing about the gearbox, and this is per the manual, they run the oil level clear up to here, as opposed to most gearboxes where you only run about halfway up the shaft and let the oil climb the gears. So I'm sure that's gonna, especially using it because that's a vented plug. Why they have a vent here and a vent there, I don't know, but that's their deal. I'm sure they got a reason for it. But I'm sure until the oil level gets to a happy spot with heat expansion and everything, it's probably gonna be a slobbering son of a bitch, which it already is since I started it. I had a rag right here. Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily a need to do right now. I was more concerned with making it work, but we'll have to get a belt. There's supposed to be a belt guard over all that. We'll have to get that on there sooner rather than later. I'm probably not going to do it before this season, but probably just end up making one for it. I'm sure that they'd probably want a stupid amount of money just to get a factory one, and they ain't that complicated. It's probably the quietest I've ever heard one of them spreaders run. Still slobbering. I don't know why they want to run the oil that high, but that's what they say to do in the book. So anyhow, we finally have one. After everything we've been doing for the last 2 months, we finally have a project that is just completely scratched off the list, and it only took 2 videos to get it done. So hopefully tomorrow night I'll have time to sit down and figure out what I'm putting on the wheat, and I'm probably going to get enough whatever I decide to put on the wheat, and I'll spread a little bit. I want to say I'll spread a little bit on the hay ground, but that new hay field, I don't know if it'll be dry enough to get over it without rutting it up, and we don't want to do that on a hay field. So the hay might wait until I know for sure we're dry. But anyway, I know the wheat will be dry unless we get an exuberant amount of rain tonight. I know the wheat will be dry enough because that's all sand ground over there. So if I can get a wheat blend put together tomorrow night, Friday I'll run down and get a load of fertilizer, and this weekend we'll get wheat top dressed, hopefully, because that needs to get done. So, and now I got a fertilizer spreader of my own to do it. So, with that being said, I guess that's it for this one. We'll catch you guys on the next one.